Some time ago, a friend of mine with a fairly large online audience made a post asking the question, "What are you willing to die for?" He got a number of respondents, with pretty much everybody answering with some variation of, "I die for my family." This is, of course, laudable, but the interesting thing regarding the answers he received was what people didn't say. Nobody said they'd be willing to die for anything larger or outside of themselves and their immediate kin. Nobody replied they'd die for their faith, town, their state, province, their people, or their country. I don't recall anybody saying they'd die for any sort of ideology either. There were no calls for self-immolation on behalf of human rights, liberal values, democracy, the free market, equality, or anything like that. Now, this isn't an indictment of any of the respondents, but it's indicative of the modern world we live in. Nobody has ever willingly sacrificed themselves for something they didn't believe in, but you would often find people in the past who would willingly sacrifice themselves for the transcendent. It would appear now, however, that modern society lacks the capacity to produce these people in any sort of large number. The modern world has deracinated Western man, to the point where he by and large isn't willing to sacrifice himself for much of anything because he has lost his zeal, his pre-modern faith in the supernatural, and his connection to any sort of group identity or culture or hierarchy which he can claim as his own and which he can firmly identify with. This is perhaps one of the more insidious aspects of the age we live in today. It's a tyranny of liberation. In a world where man is free to make his own identity and determine his own meaning, he has made himself into a being plush with comforts, but devoid of faith or any social bonds that give him not only a place and sense of identity, but also a clear yardstick by which he can measure himself. Ours is the age of the bug man for a reason. Of course, the system we live in probably had some of these outcomes baked in by design and sold with a mixture of lies and prophecies of liberation and comfort. And to a certain extent, the prophecies of liberation and comfort weren't wholly lies or incorrect. By materialist metrics at least, we can live lives now of unparalleled convenience, comfort, and ease. It might be harder for a family to buy a house in much of the developed world now, but a lot of these people don't seem all that keen on starting families in any case, even if they could afford to buy a family home and provide for one. So the one-bedroom apartment, the video games, the porn, and the Netflix will do just fine for them. The landscape may have been painted by a corrupt and evil elite, but it was made possible by the Faustian acceptance of modern man to live there. This worldview of quantity and comfort I've just described has been strangely juxtaposed quite recently. After nearly 20 years of occupying the country of Afghanistan, attempting to build a Western-style liberal democracy for it, and spending untold billions on training its army and funding it, and erecting a new state, the U.S. military has withdrawn from the country. On May 1st, the Taliban organized a number of events across Afghanistan, met with relatively minor resistance. This was the original deadline that the United States Armed Forces had agreed to leave by before the agreement was unilaterally altered by President Biden to later in the year. Then, on August 6th, the Taliban launched assaults on the provincial capitals of Afghanistan and took the towns essentially unopposed. Their rapid takeover of Afghanistan was not because the Afghan army, so dearly trained and outfitted by Uncle Sam, lacked the material means to engage with the Taliban. It was simply that the Afghan army didn't want to fight for the world that was created for them. They were not willing to fight, let alone die, for a vision of Afghanistan that had been erected by American power and diplomacy. But the Taliban were willing to fight and die to see it come to an end. Also, if American public opinion polling can be trusted, Americans aren't willing to fight or die for it either. Not anymore. This episode gave me a moment of pause and made me ask myself what I'd be willing to die for, personally. My family, certainly. I also don't believe I would renounce Christ to save my own life. However, I can't think of much else I'd be willing to die for because I don't see such a cause existing within the real world that it'd have any chance of success. That, I think, is one of the main problems in the West today. The Taliban, as backward as they are and as false as their religious views are from a Christian perspective, possess a strength of belief which simply doesn't exist en masse in the West anymore. This was not always the case, even till fairly recently. In the book For Cause and Comrades, Why Men Fought in the Civil War, historian James M. McPherson clearly shows how legions of American men were willing to fight and die to either protect their states and what they conceived of as their rights, or otherwise to preserve the Union and the mystical ties that bound it together. Looking further back, we can see hosts of Christians in the West ready to fight and die for their faith, whether to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muhammadans during Crusade or to Christianize the pagan world. You'd be hard-pressed to find such fervent belief today anywhere, not only in the West, but in the broader world as well. This lack of commitment to anything higher than ourselves or our immediate kin is a problem that has to be overcome. I'm not sure what the answer is, as modernity itself and the comforts and ensuing atomization associated with it seems partially to have been inevitable with the economic development we've undergone. What I am sure of, though, is that man must first reclaim his capacity to believe, to really believe, which can only be done through religious faith. As Western society begins to feel the stress of its own ideological nonsense and contradictions, it is my hope that, more and more, people will begin to face the God they had turned their backs on and learn, once again, to believe and find something worth dying for. This has been Mr. Patriarch. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. If you're new here, please give this video a like or a comment if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to see more. It helps out with the algorithm. Another way you can help the channel is to share this video with someone who you think will benefit. If you want to support this channel directly above and beyond well wishes, please consider becoming a backer on Subscribestar. It'll be a big help to both me and my family. Special thanks to my backers Burnham's Ghost, Doomgoy, Count Elmsley, Christofferson, Mulkeystein, Symbols, Turnian, Focron, JNS77, Fresno Pharmacist, Geradon, Itinerant, and The Prudentialist. You guys really help me keep doing what I'm doing, and I don't take it for granted. Thanks to all my supporters and viewers, and I'll talk to you again soon. Patriarch, out.